Hello, everybody. I'm Nick Kman. I'm an emergency physician at Ohio State, and I help with disaster response with Ohio Task Force 1. I've really enjoyed doing these video blogs for Columbus Medical Association, and so I wanted to give you one about the vaccine. So, as everyone has probably heard at this point, the vaccine arrived on Monday. Ohio State did get some of the Pfizer vaccine, and I was fortunate enough to receive the vaccine on Tuesday, and and everything went great. It went great. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I'll give you my opinion on the safety and the distribution, and hopefully we can let people make an informed decision about whether they want to take the vaccine. So a little bit about the vaccine itself. So I'm certainly not a virologist or an epidemiologist, but the science here is actually pretty slick. So we knew since January what the genetic code of coronavirus was, and they were able to figure out what the code for the spike protein was. So the spike protein is the thing on the surface of the virus that allows it to get into your cells and make you sick. So we knew that we could write the instructions for how to make the spike protein since January. And really that's when the drug companies started making the vaccine. So again, that spike protein is what allows the virus to make you sick in your cells. So what these vaccines do, and I'm going to speak today about the Pfizer vaccine that I received and then the Moderna vaccine, what they do is they have little pieces of mRNA. Messenger RNA is genetic code on how to make proteins. So this gets injected into your arm and it goes into a cell, and our cells have things in them called ribosomes that make proteins. And so this little piece of messenger RNA is like an email sent to your cells, and they produce the spike protein. Your body then makes antibodies against the spike protein. So when you come into contact with coronavirus, you already have those antibodies there. mRNA is very unstable. That's why it has to be kept at these ultra low temperatures. So once your body sees the mRNA, makes the protein, the mRNA goes away. It very quickly degrades. And that's also part of the reason why we need a booster shot or a second dose. So, some of the things that you've heard, it changes your genetic code. It does not do that. It hangs around and it'll be present in your DNA. That's not true. It comes into our cells, we make antibodies, it goes away, and we're left with those antibodies. Now, we don't necessarily know how long we will be, so we may have to get the shot again, but this is really incredible science and may really change how we make vaccines in the future. It's an advanced technology. The Pfizer vaccine is 2 doses administered 3 weeks apart. So I know already I get my second dose the first week of January. Both doses were studied for efficacy. So the FDA has recommended that if you get one, you get the other. And the Moderna vaccine is 4 weeks apart. They've also recommended not exchanging these, and they've recommended that both doses are what are required for the 95% efficacy. It is thought that you do get some immunity from one shot, but not the full, studied immunity that we saw, in the trials. So one of the things that we were really waiting on the emergency use authorization to tell us is, can we give this to people who have already had coronavirus? And the answer is yes, unless they're acutely infected and on quarantine. So one of the really interesting things about the vaccine is that it's so well engineered to the spike protein that the immunity may actually be better and longer acting than the natural immunity you get from infection. So with natural immunity, your body makes antibodies to different pieces of the virus, not just the spike protein. And it's kind of a little bit messier of an immune response. So, one of the things, there are some contraindications. So if somebody's had a severe allergic reaction to a vaccine, and not just a severe allergic reaction. So if you carry an EpiPen because you have a bee sting allergy, that would not exclude you from the vaccine. We would probably watch you a little bit longer just to make sure, but I actually have severe seasonal allergies. I'm the person that in the spring is nose running and I'm on Zyrtec and those kinds of things. I had no issues whatsoever. The other thing that would preclude people for 2 weeks from getting the vaccine is if they had had another vaccine. So we've seen some people who have had a flu shot or a tetanus booster, and they actually have to wait 2 weeks before they can get the vaccine. Good news here too, pregnant and breastfeeding patients and immunocompromised patients can receive the vaccine. We do recommend that those folks have a discussion with their doctor about risks and benefits, just because those were groups that weren't well studied when the phase 1, 2, and 3 trials were done for both of these vaccines. And finally, no vaccine is 100% effective. So what we're going to recommend is we continue to do the things we do. So even after I get my second vaccination, when I go into a room in the emergency department and see a patient with coronavirus, I'm still going to have my N100 on and my eye protection and my gown and gloves, because I want to make sure that I'm not able to, get some subclinical infection that I could bring home. So it's going to still be a while that we're going to be doing these protective measures, like not getting into large gatherings, staying away from crowds, cleaning our hands, wearing masks, all those things. So a little bit about the 2 vaccines. So I've had people ask me, should I get one? Should I get the other? They're very similar. The technology is almost identical. The Pfizer vaccines, 2 doses, 3 weeks apart. The Moderna vaccines, 2 doses, 4 weeks apart. Again, you shouldn't really mix those. In fact, I have a call, today about planning for what we do when we have both on site and we have people we have to revaccinate with one and for another. I mean, we have that, we keep that information. And actually, when you get your vaccination card, it's on there. But, that's going to take some tracking. As far as the studies, the Pfizer study was studied on age groups 16 and up. Moderna was 18 and up. And I actually think that might be a little bit important because we know that, some teenagers and high school age kids don't get the real bad symptoms, but may pass the virus on. And so the fact that we can include another group of that 16 plus, with the Pfizer vaccine might be good. Moderna did a little bit more study, from what I understand, on their stability at different temperatures. And Pfizer is doing that study now. But right now, one of the biggest differences is this idea of how these things are stored and transported. So the Pfizer vaccine has to be stored at sub-zero, very cold temperatures, whereas Moderna is in a regular freezer. So I think, the idea of getting this out to doctors' offices and nursing homes might be a little bit easier with Moderna, whereas the Pfizer vaccine went out to 10 pre-staged hospitals that were really picked because they have the type of storage that's needed. And then one of the things that I recently read and want to learn more about is I think the Moderna vaccine did a little bit more studying on not just did people get sick with coronavirus, but actually did they have coronavirus and could they transmit it? And the answers they found were no. So, right now we know that there's a 95% chance that you're not going to get, that you're not going to get a clinical episode of coronavirus or COVID-19. But we don't know whether you might have it and can pass it along. And the Moderna studies show that it may be the case that the vaccine prevents that as well, which would be really great. So you heard this idea of side effects. So we call that reactogenicity. And really what it is the feeling of your body making antibodies. So when I received the vaccine Tuesday night, my arm was pretty sore. A little bit more sore than a flu shot, if I'm being honest, but not, terrible. And, what was going on in those tissues is your body is transcribing that spike protein and your body's making antibodies to it. So next time, let's say I go in a room and my mask gets pulled off or something happens and I get coronavirus, I'll have antibodies that are going to be able to protect me from that. I will say this, some of the studies showed that those side effects or reactogenicity was worse after the second shot. So, maybe I'll come back and let you know how I feel after the January shot that I get. But I can tell you that I did not schedule a shift the next day just in case. But the day after I got the shot, which was Wednesday, I was at work all day and felt fine. So, so these are some of the other, things that we've seen. There are other vaccines in the pipeline, including AstraZeneca, who's finishing enrolling for their phase 3, and Johnson & Johnson and others. So that's good news, right? Because it means that it's more vaccine that we can get out to people. A little bit about Operation Warp Speed. So, I had a colleague that really doesn't like the name because warp sounds like it's twisted and speed sounds like it was sped up and we skipped tests or processes. But really what happened is this: they essentially did what was a normal vaccine study all in series. So research and development was started, and then they started phase 1 clinical trials. And as soon as there was promise in phase 1, they started manufacturing the vaccine. So they were essentially manufacturing to the tune of millions of dollars of vaccine that they didn't know was going to necessarily work. And you would never do that normally, right? But we're in the middle of a pandemic. So the government put billions of dollars knowing that some of these would fail and that frankly money would be lost. But we lucked out with the ones that were successful, that manufacturing of those vaccines started months and months ago. Because what you don't want is last week the FDA approves the Pfizer vaccine, and okay, so let's start making vials. Well, now we got to wait months before we get the vaccine. So really there weren't skipped steps here. What happened is a lot more money was injected into this, pardon my pun, and so now we have all this vaccine at the same time that we know that it works, which is good. So again, not really any skipped steps here. The steps were taken, they were just taken in a very quick fashion. So this is how the National Academy of Medicine has recommended the vaccine be distributed. And just like everything in the pandemic, the states have autonomy to decide who needs these vaccines. So really our state has prioritized healthcare workers and nursing home residents. So with the first allocation, about 10% went to healthcare workers and about 90% was allocated to nursing homes. Next week, we hope to get more vaccine, and some of that will include first responders. And we'll continue to add groups as we get the highest risk folks vaccinated. So I've been helping a little bit with this at our institution, and some of the things that we've prioritized with our healthcare workers is really prioritizing maximum benefit. So we have over 24,000 employees, and we got 975 doses. So we got under 1,000 doses. And we wanted to make sure that we promoted justice by vaccinating people regardless of what they do. So a physician, a nurse, a tech, a respiratory therapist, if they're all working in the intensive care unit, they all get equal kind of claim to vaccine. So not just physicians, everybody based on risk, because, as some of you know, a respiratory therapist might, pass you the tube on 3 airways a day and have the greatest risk of all of that. So we wanted to make sure we included those groups. We also wanted to make sure we mitigated health inequity. So there was a lot of discussion at our institution about, do we ask our employees if they have diabetes or hypertension or cancer or age greater than 65? The problem is, people go to different doctors. We don't have that information. It's HIPAA protected. We can't get it. So the only way you can find that out is if people self-attest. Well, we have employees that have English as a second language, or maybe don't check their email as much. And so what happens is, if you go by that model, the people with the loudest voices are heard and some of the other ones are not. And, health inequity can happen that way. And then we also talked about voluntarism from the standpoint of if you had recent coronavirus, let's say you had coronavirus 2 weeks ago, maybe you forego the vaccine for a couple of months. We know you have immunity, right? At least for some time, and wait and get it later on. And but we want people to be informed if they do that. We want you to have the information. We want you to know that you're not contraindicated from this. So again, our 975 doses, I think the plan is for them to be gone by the end of the day today. And those went out to critical care units that are taking care of COVID patients, emergency department where undifferentiated can't breathe, CPR in progress, those types of very high risk situations happen. And we're going to move out to other higher risk situations. You know, our health system, like others in the region, has very high COVID volume. So just including COVID patient providers is going to, you know, really use up a large amount of the vaccine. This is the slide that ODH and the governor released in terms of the groups that they're prioritizing. And as I said, healthcare workers got a very small 10% of the first allotment this week. We hope to get more of that. But we recognize that nursing homes is where a lot of the COVID mortality occurs. In fact, 30% of the people that die from coronavirus are nursing home residents. And we know that the staff that works there are certainly at risk. So the plan is for CVS and Walgreens to vaccinate those groups together. And then other types of congregate living will be prioritized, I think, as more vaccine comes out. So this is starting Monday. We received 975 vaccines as one of 10 sites. So a total of 9,750 vaccines went out. Again, 88,000 vaccines went to CVS and Walgreens. And I actually saw in the news today, Friday, December 18th, that the first nursing home patients were getting vaccinated. So I was happy to hear that because I was a little bit concerned that they were getting a lot more vaccine than the health systems were. And logistically, I think it's a lot harder to vaccinate a lot of small nursing homes. So we're really hopeful that next week, a lot of the Moderna vaccine can come out to, there's supposedly 98 more hospitals and 108 health departments. And that would include starting to vaccinate some of our brave first responders who, you know, go into houses where somebody can't breathe and really are on the front lines for sure. So next week, the hope is, and the FDA is meeting currently, and the hope is that we have an EUA today, that some of those EMS providers and more hospitals can get vaccine. And then on we go. Our plan is to really vaccinate people up through the 23rd. You know, the team's been working nonstop since the beginning of November. So, you know, take a break for Christmas Eve, Christmas, and then, you know, kind of get back at it. But we're ready for as much vaccine as we can get. The people that work at the medical center are excited to get it. And, you know, we value everyone, you know, that works in healthcare, and it's really tough to prioritize 975 vaccines, as you can imagine. At a large medical center, the emergency department and two of our other ICUs soaked most of that up. So we're hoping, you know, for more of that. This is what ODH has released as the rest of the plan. So the National Academy of Medicine has said that phase 2 would be critical workers. So, you know, your electric company, your power company, your water company, your grocery store workers, people that kind of keep our country rolling. But that would be after phase 1B, which is the most vulnerable adults. So there's a lot of vaccinations that need to happen before we get to phase 3 and phase 4. Phase 3 is, you know, colleges and universities, places where the virus passes around. And then phase 4 is just everybody else. You know, the thought is, you know, maybe sometime after April, you could walk into a CVS or a Walgreens and get the vaccine. But I think that's a ways down the road. But right now, you know, it's only good news that 975 vaccines came out this week. It gets us started towards that idea of herd immunity. But what we need to remember is this: herd immunity is when 70 to 80% of people have either had the vaccine or the virus and have natural immunity. we're not anywhere even close to that right now. So, you know, we need to maintain what we're doing, our masking, our social distancing, our hand hygiene, you know, trying to, if we congregate, doing it outdoors and things like that, and doing it in very small groups. But we also can be hopeful that, you know, the vaccine is coming out in large supplies, and hopefully, you know, things will go well with that. So that concludes the talk for now. So hopefully I'll, you know, be back with another update, maybe sometime in the next couple weeks when we have an idea what the supply chain looks like. So thanks a lot for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. And I can be reached by email or Twitter, and happy to answer questions.